So it's been a few weeks since the 90% refinance to add a suite or second dwelling in a property rules have been announced by CMHC. And that's about enough time to start to think about where you would rank this program and what were the pros and cons and what could happen when it comes to the CMHC program in Canada. But before we get into it, let's talk about the key details of the program, specifically what we know so far. And it's important to note that we don't know everything yet. So when the new rules are fully and officially announced and they're launched in January of 2025, we will have more details to bring to you. So stay tuned and stay subscribed until that time. All right, let's get into it. First and foremost, this program is an insured program that lets you refinance up to 90% of the as complete value of your home for adding a basement suite or second dwelling or laneway home on your property, which is a unique and the first of its kind. Now, in that comment, I mentioned the as complete value. We don't know if that's the as complete value based on the cost of construction or the appraised value, because as you know, adding a basement suite or a second dwelling to a property can actually increase the property value. And so therefore, you can increase the value higher than what the cost is. For this time, we're gonna talk about the actual cost element. So for example, if your property is worth $1 million today and you spend $100,000 to construct this suite, hypothetically, you would be able to refinance 90% of that $1.1 million and that cost included in that amount for those new scenarios. Second thing you need to know is you have to qualify under the traditional guidelines of 39% of your gross debt towards your actual mortgage, with 44% of your total debt going towards all of your expenses. And this program is also qualified based on a 30-year amortization. Now, because this is a CMHC program, you can expect there will be no exceptions to those debt service ratios, unlike a typical bank's uninsured programs, which allows you to actually, in many cases, borrow more than 39% or 44% of your total debt. This program also is available for multiple unit properties. So a 2 to 4 unit property qualifies up to 4 units essentially at this point right now to actually use this program, which is quite interesting. And you can see how small multi-unit property owners are getting very excited about the prospect of adding to their property and refinancing to take the equity out to do it all over again. Another couple things to consider: this program allows only for long-term rentals. It does not allow for short-term rentals. We don't know exactly for how long that's the case or how they're going to track that, but with the Army, they have it, the CRA, best believe they will track that information and they'll fine you if you do decide to short-term rental that. We'll find out more details about that afterwards. And you must have a fully self-contained unit, so that must have a kitchen, a separate entry, a bathroom, a bedroom, all of the typical things that you need to actually live. It cannot just be an in-law suite or a hot plate to qualify for this particular program. So this program also allows you to be insured up to $2 million, which is very interesting because CMHC announced the ability to purchase a home and do a mortgage up to $1.5 million, and they're bending the rules already for this type of a program to allow for up to $2 million for a refinance scenario to borrow up to 90% of the property. So the idea of this particular program, specifically coming from Chrystia Freeland herself, was to unlock more land. There's a statistic in Canada from a few years ago that suggested that over 31% of bedrooms in our country were not being used. In addition to that, there is a stat that suggests that over 5 million bedrooms in Ontario alone are apparently not being used. And the idea here is to do two things. One, to open up vacant land, so for laneway homes or extensions to property, as opposed to trying to find new land. And the other factor or the consideration is to get people to rent out those empty rooms, to use those properties, use those houses, generate income, provide places for families to live, and do so without actually having the government or any other developers to do the work. So they're basically coming back to homeowners and asking them to be the mom and pop investors all over again. Let's stop on that for a second. The mom and pop investor has basically been all but vilified for the last 2 to 3 years to supposedly have been causing the housing crisis and being the problem all along by purchasing properties as investment properties. Now, let's talk about that for a second. The idea is that mom and pop investors actually help a lot of developments get built because they're the ones who are buying and putting deposits down on pre-sale properties, and developers don't actually build properties until they have enough money in the pocket. So let's rewind mind a little bit more now that we're in this quote unquote housing crisis and all of these mom and pop investors have lost money. Canada is coming back and saying, yes, we need your help. We want you to be landlords. We want you to own properties. And this is a program that we're going to help you do to get there. Now, whether you think this is good or bad, unequivocally, it is probably one of the better options that CMHC and the government has come out with, because it is actually looking to solve a portion of the problem, which is unlocking the land that we have without having to necessarily continue to build towers and getting rooms in houses used in areas where people aren't even, quite frankly, using them. This could also be a benefit to people who are living in their properties and want to stay there as opposed to downsizing, or they want to keep their yards and their land, but they're looking for an opportunity to increase revenue, especially when it comes to the cost of living. So some of the concerns here are pretty obvious. The government is relying on what could be considered amateur building. Now, let's be honest, not everybody is going to be an amateur builder and try to do a bang up job trying to construct the suites themselves. I'm sure there'll be some guidelines around this, but there will unfortunately be a sum of people who cobble together some crappy little suite or laneway home for as cheap as possible and rent it out that could have a lot of problems. On the flip side, there also likely will be a lot of great general contractors and contractors out there who will do a good job and probably market this type of a program to a lot of people if they're savvy and looking for opportunities to grow their own personal business. Other issues with this program are, well, we just don't have all the details. As I mentioned earlier, what is the cost as complete? How is it defined? Who's defining it? How are they tracking short-term versus long-term? And what is the impact on the marketplace? How are they dealing with just areas and roadways that were not designed to have this many houses and units in an area? Is this going to cause sewage and electrical problems and water problems and so much more? Will the municipalities adapt to this quick enough? I think there are a lot of factors to question and ask when we relate to these types of programs, and these all have to be valid and considered. Other factors to consider are, will this be impactful because it's an insured program? Will anyone even qualify to use it? And will it just be used for people who are quote unquote house hacking, buying a house, refinancing it, living in it for a period of time, and then moving on to the next one? Again, these are all questions that we have to ask, because with any program, there is good, bad, ugly, and none of these are inherently bad other than maybe the crappy basement suite renovation. But the question mark is this solving any of the issues when it comes to Canadian housing? And the answer is yet to be determined. But I'd love to hear your feedback. Do you think this is a program that'll be useful? Do you think it's not? Do you agree with my comments? Or do you think this is a waste of time and no one's gonna use it and it is a problem? So leave a comment below. Let me know how you'd make this program better, or if you use this program, how would you use it going forward?